Mesdames et messieurs. Hi, everyone. Hello. Hey, have you ever wanted to go north? I mean, really, really, really north? I am not as far north as you can get because I will be later today. But this is a whole different level of north. And I'm in the land, well, I'm in a multicultural community way up here. Just check that everybody's hearing me okay. Tuktoyaktuk. That's where I'm going to be heading afterwards. But this is the real true north, strong and free. Somebody you might recognize behind me. Hi there, everyone. So, the land of the northern lights. We are about 68 degrees north. Do you know what? It is. Hi. I'm actually going to put in my headphones, okay? I think I'm going to do that as just a logical thing. Make sure everyone's hearing me okay. Hi. Hey. Hello, all you lovely people. There's the North Mart. You know you're in the far north. Now, I have been to northern communities before. I'm just checking that everyone is hearing me okay. Um, and then we're going to launch into discussing all sorts of really incredible things up here. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to show you the most famous building in Iqaluit first. Okay, that sounds better. Thank you. There you are. Hey, hi everyone. Lovely to have you all here. I'm trying to do like a half-hour tour every day of this trip because who knows when we're going to get back here. Although I have a ton to show you. I'm sorry, my gimbal is a little funky, but there is the famous Igloo Church. So that is actually a Catholic church. So that is the Igloo Church up there. So I really would love, hi everyone. The gimbal is just, I need a new gimbal, but I don't want to talk about that while I'm doing this. It is lovely to be here. So if you don't know where I am, you need to look on the map and find Inuvik. Right now, this is the land, this is a multicultural community. It was only really founded back in the 1950s as Aklavik, which is 30 nautical miles the other side of the delta, kept flooding. So they moved the capital over here. And let's just talk about that for a minute because it really is remarkable. So the delta, I'm on the delta of the Mackenzie River. So, hi there. From 57.8, yeah, I'm at 68 degrees north roughly. So the Mackenzie River is the second largest river system on Turtle Island in North America. Right. So obviously the Mississippi, which drains something like 38. I've got to show you a building over here. That's what I keep walking towards. Um, about 38 states. And if you look at a map of southern Louisiana, it looks really quite similar to where I am here. So get on a map and scan out. There are something like 10,000 lakes in between all the river channels of the mighty Mackenzie River. I mean, that's how vast and incredible it is. The Mackenzie is draining Great Slave Lake, which is where Yellowknife is. I'm in Northwest Territories here in obviously Canada. There's 3 territories in this country: Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. And both Yukon and NWT. Oh, it's a school. Sorry, that's what. So I'm just going to show you schools coming out. Never go. Obviously, it's recess over there. Great big school. But there's also back here somewhere a community greenhouse. That's what kind of, well, it doesn't kind of, really interests me because, of course, we're so far extremely north up here, and it's the delta of the Beaufort Sea. So if you go back to where I'm from in the world, way down, I mean, it's so funny. People say to me, I live in a cold northern place when I'm in Banff. Yet Banff driving, because you can drive here for twice a year, you cannot, because twice a year, the 2 rivers are freezing up or thawing. So you either go over the ice bridge or a ferry, and twice a year you can't do either. There's the school back up here. But there's a solar farm that I just passed. Somewhere back here, might be attached to the school. There's actually a greenhouse. So let's go wander around. The Oh, good question. Actually, for me to drive home is about 3,600 kilometers on the road. You take the Dempster Highway down, but you go all the way down to Banff for Jasper specifically. And if you're standing in beautiful Jasper, coming off Mount Snow Dome at the Columbia Ice Fields, uh, is the Sunwapta River, then the Athabasca River, which makes it all the way, it's huge school, yeah, makes it all the way up into Lake Athabasca, which then flows up into Great Slave Lake. And Great Slave Lake, one of the deepest lakes in the world, I think the 10th deepest one, that then drains and becomes the start of this Mackenzie River, which comes all the way out to the Delta here. So flying over it yesterday, I'll put up some more photos on Facebook or YouTube. I mean, it was gorgeous and massive. I mean, massive thing. And so say 30 nautical miles, which I think is about 50 kilometers across. I mean, that's just how spectacular it is. So that's where we are. This is also a very, very important meeting place. The clouds are gorgeous. The sky is, you almost feel when you're up north here. I don't know if it's psychological or not, but you feel like you see the curvature of the earth. I've always heard this. I've been well, this is the furthest north I've ever been in my life. And I'm just so excited. I mean, yesterday I was such a nerd on the aircraft. It was a 2 hour flight up from Whitehorse into Old Crow. Old Crow has 239 people and no road access. Landed there on the Porcupine River, some of the oldest archaeological sites in North America. Like people may well have been living here 25,000 years ago, which throws away the story as we've talked about it. But we landed up in Old Crow, and I was able to get out and walk around a little bit. But I do want to talk about the architecture. A million things to talk about here. So just get my thoughts. It's exciting to be up here. But people migrated in, and of course these are real fishing cultures. But when I say this is a multicultural society, this is where the Gwich'in people, which is, I believe, a Dene language group, which is Athabascan, that meets up with the Inuvialuit, or as you would think of as Inuit people, right? So really, everything north of this becomes the greater Inuit culture. It goes back to the Thule culture. Same people who live over in Greenland, and of course the coast of Alaska, right? So it's two cultures come together. Old Crow, where I was yesterday, is the most northerly indigenous community that's not Inuit, um, at least on Turtle Island, if not in the whole wide world. So the end of the Dempster Highway, some of the old log cabins. Here's the great big community greenhouse right here. So loop around. I'm going to take you down to see the river, but let's talk about the architecture. By the way, that's the hotel we stayed at last night, Mackenzie. Modern, but you look at the base of the hotel, and you see some wood down there. Now, look over here at this building. All of these buildings are built on pylons. They're built above the ground, and all the sewage and water systems are all built above the ground. That is because this is all permafrost. The ground is, well, permanently frozen, shifting and melting. Do you know the high today is said to be 22 degrees Celsius? Right? I'm in shorts still, by the way. You'll be happy to know. See? But I do have my light jacket on just because it's a little windy. Um, but to build in this kind of environment, you have to prop it all up. So they came and surveyed the land in 1954. People have lived in the region, again, from all accounts, for thousands of years because you would have had so much food in the whole Beaufort Sea system. Um, Thank you. Yeah, it's so much information. Yeah, it's 22 degrees. So yeah, I think I was asked the question earlier yesterday. Of course, I was in southern Yukon on about the most beautiful day of the whole year. And it's so funny to say southern Yukon. I actually drove down to into British Columbia yesterday, and then when we flew up, now it was an old propeller airplane. And you know what? I had trouble getting to sleep because my ears bothered me last night. Just sitting right by the propeller, but it was so beautiful to see it. Here's a Discover Inuvik, Chief Jim Coe Park. I don't know who Chief Jim Coe is, but there you are. So the Arctic Circle, as you see, is 60. Thank you so much. 66.33 north. And the giant Mackenzie. And I'm going to walk down to Mackenzie. Oops, sorry. And there you get a sense of what the city is. And there's the gigantic delta. So yesterday, if you joined me on the tour when I was down in Carcross in southern Yukon, I was sitting looking out, of course, at beautiful mountains, everything. This is all flat, 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 because it's a delta. like I say, treat yourself. I was explaining it this morning, showing my client the maps of both southern Louisiana, the Amazon, the whole basin in Alexandria by the Nile. This is what deltas are, right? Check out these languages up here. So this is a multilingual place. The top language will be Gwich'in, and then the next language is Inuvialuit. When you see those Q's showing up, Q is always a giveaway. Um, it's so this is where people would go in and do drumming, which of course huge tradition. And there's Inuit throat singing up here, which is also just an incredible thing. Doesn't seem to be any drumming going on, but that's what this whole setup is in here. You see, um, and uh, and boy, I mean, gosh, I would love to be able to sit down and just chat with someone who really grew up here. There's some interesting government buildings around. CBC is up here. Now there is oil and gas exploration up here in the Beaufort. So the economy seems to be doing well to me, which I think is kind of a neat thing. And here is the sign for the town of Inuvik, Northwest Territories, a tribute to the engineers and contractors who planned, designed, and built the town of Inuvik. When they moved it over, Aklavik, the old capital, is still there with 700 people, and I flew right over it yesterday. Got a really lovely image of it, and so I listened to a talk this morning from from the mayor of that town, which is really neat. So have a look at this. This is going right back 1961. Canadians on board will know who we're talking about here. John G. Diefenbaker, so Prime Minister of Canada, July 1961. This is the first committee north of the Arctic Circle, built to provide normal facilities of a Canadian town. It was designed not only as a base for development and administration, but as a center to bring education, medical care, and new opportunities to the people of Western Arctic. Interesting that that's not written in French. Diefenbaker was the famous prime minister from Saskatchewan. Um, so that was sort of neat. Now we also have Canada Post up here. So let's loop down and go see the Mackenzie River because we've got to see it. There's so many channels. Like I say, treat yourselves to look at a map of where we actually are. So we are going to drive from here. Um, Distance wise, it's not huge, about 150 kilometers, but it calculates about 2 hours and 45 minutes to drive up to the fact that because of the unsurfaced road. I would say the one thing that's come as a little bit of a surprise to me, although I should have known better, is how many trees there's still up here. Um, but that is why you have a Nuvialit people living still in Northwest Territories, because in 1999, of course, Nunavut was created with the capital in Iqaluit. So the first time land was given back to Indigenous owners non-violently. There's an Inukchuk. But basically, the boundary between Nunavut and Northwest Territories is functionally the tree line. And so that's why there's more forest here. Now, I'm glad I'm not here in June, even though that would be the midnight sun. Like it doesn't get dark. That's the upside. The downside is that when you're here in June, all this standing water just becomes a nursery for mosquitoes. Now, obviously, it's just cooled off enough that's not happening. Here you go. These guys have driven up the Dempster Highway. So from that's a California license plate. That, by the way, is the kind of van I want because that looks like all-wheel drive. That's exactly my retirement plan there. Just before Dawson City, you turn right, and it's 880 kilometers from there up to the north. Again, with these two closures. Here are the Gendarmes Royal du Canada, the Northwest Mounted Police, who are, I mean, very important, of course, up here, but also seen by many Indigenous people as a colonizing force. And I think, fair conversation both ways. Um, Car rental, by the way, is very expensive up here. But the gentleman who rented me the car yesterday is originally from India, and he lived in St. John's, Newfoundland. He's been here a year and a half, but he says winter, the darkness is tough. But he said he sure is loving the fishing. There's the Royal Canadian Legion, and feels quite colonial. Remember, Indigenous people do have a close relationship with the monarchy because they see that as a nation to nation or monarch to monarch. They have a meat draw, by the way. When you say a meat draw, um, oh yeah, hi everyone. Um, oh, that's a great question. Do Indigenous people join the police? Yes, they do. That's been a huge effort. I mean, really a significant effort and inclusion, but also there's a force of the Canadian military, Abraham's cannabis, because cannabis, right? It's Canada. Um, and you do know the license plates here, of course, are polar bears. Um, so up in the far north are also the Canadian Rangers, and they're almost all Inuit. And those people are the ones. Do you remember our famous war that we had with Denmark slash Greenland for the island in between Ellesmere Island and Greenland, and both claimed by Canada and the Danish crown? And so once a year, I just have to show you the trees out here. Once a year, the Canadian Rangers go up there and put up a Canadian flag and leave a bottle of Canadian whiskey, and then the Danes would come and pull the flag down and put up a Greenlandic flag and leave a bottle of schnapps. And then after the invasion of yeah, that's our favorite. And then after the horrible invasion of Ukraine, we said, well, we can show that we can be responsible and just split it. So look at this. This is what. So first of all, there's a lake over there called No Name Lake, and the Great Big Mackenzie's coming here. I'm going to walk you right down to the Mackenzie River. This is sewage and water systems all above ground here. And look at that building propped up on wood. Wood works quite well, but you have to prop it all up. Everything's propped up here. In fact, if you go to Fairbanks, Alaska, which is technically, not technically, is south of the Arctic Circle, but not far, they have the University of Alaska up there, and they have the building that studies permafrost and the ground underneath it's melting and it's shifting. There, by the way, you can see the Nitat Gwich'in Council. So, Chaola. Yeah. The above ground is to stop it freezing. That's the thing. They're insulated pipes. When you're dealing with permafrost, and again, because like we're only just like a few meters above sea level here, right? We're really in a big delta. And so, because we're in this big delta, the ground underneath us, not very far down at all, is frozen all the time. And so, to try and build in basements or anything is just way too much work. So, the idea, prop the buildings up and stop the ground from melting, and then they won't shift and wreck your foundations. Look at all this, though. I mean, this is some real infrastructure up here. This is a working place. Um, and so, people are working away. The flight was really interesting. Say it was Air North, which was friendly, nice. And once again, the diversity of modern Canada, the flight attendant, all the suitcases and everything were all packed inside the airplane, but the flight attendant was Filipino, and she's I think gave us like a full sandwich. It was really great service. But we took off from Whitehorse, did not go through security when you fly in the north. You do not have, you're very welcome. You do not have security on the flights. And so we flew up, say right up along the Yukon River. I mean, I knew all of that. And then we moved north of the Yukon and got onto the Porcupine River. And there's the porcupine caribou herd. That's what the Gwich'in people have had a relationship with caribou forever. This is the massive delta coming out in the distance. I can take you right down to the river itself. Um, and then the flight lands there. We get off the plane for half hour or something, which I was so thrilled I was able to walk out there. We flew over here, a short flight. And in fact, you're going to see mountains way in the distance. See if I can zoom in. You see a ridge of mountains? Let me tell you about those in a second. We fly over here, and then the flight turns around and flies back to Dawson City, and then down to Whitehorse. So really, it's just a milk run that it goes around. That's Northern Living, commercial aviation as we know it today. It's Inuvik Northwest Territories, actually, not Yukon. We're in Inuvik Northwest Territories in Canada, way up in the Beaufort Delta. Um, and so commercial aviation, as we really know it, really started in Northern Canada. Um, that's why all of our airports start with a Y. It's CY. This old wooden building here is really lifting up and moving because it's built straight into the ground. But look at the piping once again. This is fascinating. Oh, by the way, it might only be the only petrol station or gas station might be just up there. And it's $2.50 a liter. So that's about $10 a gallon. That's the north. Now, here's the northern flags, which are just so cool. So, you all know where I'm going with this one. The only part of this country I have not been in is Nunavut. That's that beautiful flag there with the Inukjup on it. So that's up in Iqaluit, and a friend of mine is up there right now, trying to make me jealous. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to Tuktoyaktuk. And then, so you've got the Nunavut flag, and then you've got Yukon, and then NWT's here. So both Yukon and Northwest Territories both have dogs on their flags because that's how you travel historically in the north. So by water and then by dogs. So, yeah, so this old, I know nothing about this building, but I can see that it's shifting. So this would be one of the oldest buildings for sure here in town, but it's shifting along there. But here's the flag. Obviously, a windy place out here. It's getting pretty beaten up. And that is the flag of Northwest Territories. Obviously, now there's one person on board here who joined me for a tour last winter of the Legislative Assembly of Northwest Territories down in Yellowknife. Do you know that Inuvik here is the third largest community in all of NWT? There's fewer than 50,000 people up here. Oh, there, by the way, is a liquor store, which has quite restrictive hours. You know, in northern communities, I I think it can be exaggerated, but there have been historically terrible addictions problems, and that goes back to the fact that these cultures were very much nomadic cultures, you know, living off the land, hunting, and suddenly you're told to sit down in a town um, with nothing to do. You can see, but the communities, the recovery rate is just so wonderful now. And don't buy in ever to these old stories that you get these sort of racist things that say native people have a different gene and they can't have none of that. I mean, addictions are addictions, and life, of course, was just incredibly changed up here. Now, I would say with the gold rush, but actually, the main story that goes up here ends up in Herschel Island. Herschel Island's off the north coast of Yukon, but you would access it through the Beaufort Sea. You can find it, and there's archaeological sites there. But that was whaling, so probably um, bowhead whales, narwhals, of course, are up there as well. So that's the story, and that's really the route through here. Now, Arvalik, the old capital, which is still 700 people, say 30 nautical miles across the delta here, the that's where the Mad Trapper, one of the stories from old Yukon, that's where he was caught and buried. Oh, that truck is in the way, but it showed when I walked past here earlier today. It said $2.50 a liter of fuel. So that's what it was talking about. When we get back down from Tuktoyaktuk in a couple of days, I'll probably zip over here. The airport is actually about 12 kilometers out of town. That was interesting to me. But I think because of the giant delta, again, they have to find a place where the ground is firm enough to build a landing strip. And it's actually a cement strip. So when we landed in Old Crow yesterday, it was a gravel strip. But up here is a full on, like full airport. And that's because it's staging ground for the Canadian military as well. And these massive weather stations, Canadian weather stations. And there's the cell tower where I'm getting this great reception. Look at the yellow right now. Isn't it lovely? This is all. So we're really on the edge of boreal forest. Now, this is just going to become more and more and more beautiful as I come down to River Park. Already saw some boats going out fishing this morning. So this is one of the many channels of the mighty Mackenzie River out through here. And the water levels change dramatically. Now, when you see the pine trees in the distance, and I'm presuming they're jack pines or they're black spruce, it's one or the other, but they're very thin. They're very thin. They have small branches, and that once again is a testament, excuse me, to to the permafrost. This all these plants that have lost their flowers. That's all the fireweed. And the old story goes, when the fireweed tops out, here comes winter. So usually by the 15th of September, you could easily be getting some snow up in the north. Although Yellowknife, the capital of the territory, is colder than here, believe it or not. So Yellowknife, of course, last winter we were there in March. And we were getting well into the minus 40s. But that's because it's so inland. Whereas out here, you're so close to the ocean that it has a bit of a moderating effect. This would not be, although it does look slightly tidal to me, but I don't believe it is tidal right here. I really don't. If you look at those trees across, see? Come on, Zoom. There we are. See how they're all so thin? It's because their roots can only get a few centimeters into the ground. And so their branches can't be very big. But I have to take you down to the Pathfinder Ocean. And this is all part of the Canadian Coast Guard, which of course Canada, the longest coastline in the world by far. Just think, if I put on the river here, I'm looking south now. We could be in a boat for probably, I don't know, several days. And there's little isolated communities dotted along the way, some oil and gas production, particularly at a place called Norman Wells. I know a lot of people who worked there over the years from the back. Now, do you remember the ridge of mountains I showed you in the distance? So there's a big ridge. This is the boundary between Yukon Territory and the Northwestern Freeze. And it's quite easy to unpack that because even though when you get up to Old Crow in northern Yukon, north of Yukon River, but the Porcupine River is a tributary of the Yukon. So the far side of the mountains that we saw earlier is the drainage basin of the Yukon that heads all the way out to the Bering Sea. Whereas this side of the mountain all comes into this Mackenzie Delta system. So that's when in 1898 they created Yukon Territory because of the gold rush. That's the reason that was the boundary. So it was as beautiful as I hoped it would be. As we took off Old Crow, I could see the mountains. The tree line is like here. So as soon as you get up 20 or 30 meters, the tree line is gone. And then suddenly I saw the massive delta open up. So it was just so gorgeous. So here we are. This is Oceans and Fisheries Canada. And this ship here, the Ekalu, which means the Pathfinder, this goes and sets the buoys all the way up the Mackenzie River, all the way to Great Slave Lake. And because it's always shifting, you might remember if you watched the video the other day from Yellowknife. Maybe I didn't do this because a private tour. But the old paddle wheelers, someone would stand at the front with a long pole and they would be prodding the ground to see where the sandbars had shifted along the way. I would love to see a grizzly on the other side of the river here, or a polar bear, maybe not a polar bear. And I driving north. Oh, I would love to see some caribou today. So here's the Ekalu. Look at this. So there's Oceans and Fisheries Canada. There's the Northwest Territories. This is, I mean, this isn't the most isolated in the world because if you get up into Nunavut, up to the islands, or over to northern Greenland, you've got places that, of course, this does technically have road access. So, but you're still here very, very much at the end of the world. Now we're just south. When I'm up in Tuktoyaktuk, we're just south of 70 North. So that is still south. The furthest north, I mean, technically there's alert to the weather station, but really it's up in Longyearbyen in Svalbard, which are those Norwegian islands. That's about the furthest north. And there's Thule up on the northwestern coast of Greenland. That's further north. But here in the Western Arctic, these are among the most northerly communities in the whole wide world. But yes, that sky is just dramatic out there, isn't it? It's just breathtaking. And I left the curtains open last night. I kept hoping that I'd be woken up by northern lights, um, but I wasn't. But then it didn't really get that dark, even though technically you have a sunset now. Oh, the light in the distance is it's dancing. I mean, there's a magical beauty. Look at that. So now tomorrow, as long as the reception, so Old Crow, I could not have done a tour because I only had 3G, but I'm presuming I get good reception up in Tuktoyaktuk. So, but tomorrow, the high is more like 5 degrees and stormy weather. So it might be a day of just, going out for short periods. Although I'm fine. Gotta still wear shorts probably. But I am, and you can mark my words, I am swimming in the Arctic Ocean. Maybe even today because it's such a nice day. But one way or another, this body is gonna. I would almost be tempted to go down into the mud down there of the Mackenzie. I do know people who have been up here and like canoed, because you can go in just, I mean, zillions of directions. You fish so lake trout, northern pike. Um, yeah, bit of drama weather-wise, probably. That's me. Although I love it, and it's it, it whenever I think living in a country like this anyway, I'm a great believer in embracing the elements. I mean, stressing one's body is the same thing about the cold plunging. It is psychologically good, um, and it's emotionally good. Oh, there's a little plaque over here. I better go take you to it. Then I'm going to start to wander back into town. I've not eaten anything because yesterday my dinner was Doritos. um, yeah. Oh, 100% I'm going into the Arctic. Although I don't think it's as cold as the water I do at home when I go through the ice, to be honest. Because salt water is always a little bit warmer. But 100%. If I didn't swim in the Arctic, I'd have to be packed up and taken away. So look at this. One of their great jokes up here is you're teeing off at 3 o'clock, but is it 3 p.m. or 3 a.m.? So snowmobiling is by far the most popular winter activity in Nuvik. The frozen Mackenzie Delta makes perfect trails, and of course, no bugs. Yes, But I did yesterday have Arctic char for lunch, which was just fantastic. But by the time I got in, it was quite late. Um, So they go lying on the ice road. So tomorrow is the very end of the Trans Canada Trail. And for any Canadian, of course, I have stood at mile zero of the Trans Canada Highway in Victoria, British Columbia, and in St. John's, Newfoundland. And now will be the great north, of course. As we say in this country, from sea to sea to sea, particularly when our sovereignty is being challenged. And so that is a very significant thing as well. And for all the faults this country has, and there are many of them, but it is so lovely to see. It's just smiling at me. They probably see so many tourists come up here and do videos. Um, but it is so nice to see that we are, gradually, well, working towards reconciliation, but also building a society together. I love to see the Indigenous languages around, but boy, oh boy, it's going to be an effort to keep them all going. Although up in Tuktoyaktuk, I expect it'll be much, much more prevalent. So, the land of the Nuvaliat people. And I always would have said Inuktitut, but indeed. So, so we've already had. Sorry, just sneezed. Um, it's a lovely, soft sort of. Of course, it's coastal weather, right? Like there's a lot more humidity here than there is where I live. Ah ben ça fait tellement plaisir. J'aurais adoré faire un tour aussi en français ici avec mes peuples. C'est tout bilingue. I became very good friends with a young lady yesterday on the plane. She was 4 years old. Hey guys, thanks. Um, I see they just said to me, enjoy your trip. The young lady who was just 4 with her mommy, they had been down in the big city of Whitehorse. But so I chatted with her her mom's parents. So she grew up here, and her parents were from Gaspé, which is eastern Quebec, and Nova Scotia. And in fact, her surname was Brewster, which is a name synonymous with them, but that wasn't their connection. But the young lady was just lovely, and she was excited because she was going off to school to um, not really daycare, it's c'est play maternelle, kindergarten. Uh, so go off and see your friends. But yeah, this was home, and the little one was just lovely and looking out the window for the flight, and you know, just gorgeous. So there we are. So I am going to go meet my friend. Going to load up the vehicle, then definitely look at the greenhouse, get some food, and then as soon as you leave town, about 12 kilometers outside, boom, no more reception till you get up to the north coast here. So that's the up on Took, and I'll just see what reception's like. So do watch absolutely 100% for a tour tomorrow. But I'm going to be in the land of pingos. Are you all super excited to see pingos? I hope you are. And you say, but what's a pingo? Pingo is a big frozen lake that lifts up out of the ground. And so up in the dead flat Beaufort Delta, you suddenly have these hills. So I am going to try my best, but we will drive. I'm going to drive very, very safely up the middle of the gravel road. And maybe Arctic fox. I would love to see muskox, but I don't think they're here. I'm going to get to a couple of the islands up there, Prince Patrick Island or stuff. A herd of caribou would actually make me cry. That would be, but and then hopefully Arctic char. Oh, and they also get walleye or pickerel in this water, which is so delicious. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, hey, thank you for coming to the north. It is just a magical, different world up here. And as they say up in the north, education's so high in this country, you can know what's going on in the rest of the world. You just don't have to care. All right, everyone, listen. Thank you for coming along on the walk. Thanks for the donations, and I will see you hopefully tomorrow from Tuktoyak. Oh, and by the way, in a few days it'll be Dawson City, which is, of course, the most amazing place in the north. Oh, it's the people from California in their van, so they're going to have to start heading south pretty soon. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Big hugs. Feel free to share these on your social media and everything, folks, because it's nice to keep growing it. Boy, that's nice, man. I'm getting envy. Okay, lots of love from the north. Bye bye.